tenacity and courage of moving forward and walking forward despite fear, right? I think the third thing is understanding the math. And when I say the math, it's not always financial. It could be qualitative, it could be quantitative. And so I include relationships, understanding the math of relationships, knowing when you need to walk away, and not saying that not walking away doesn't mean that that person's a bad person. But that person is not aligned with the situation or the goals that you're working towards. And yeah, so I mean, I could talk infinitum about this, but I think those are some of the things that I have seen of understanding the math of the financials, whatever the situation, where it's personal financials, the business financials, but also the math of leadership, the math of relationships, and being able to have some critical analysis to be able to make quick, relatively low information decisions to be able to propel you forward.
Wow.
Welcome to the King Dems Podcast, where we share the stories of extraordinary people and dissect hot, relevant topics that shape our world. From visionary leaders to trailblazing creatives, we uncover the mindset, strategy, and grit behind greatness. Whether it's business, culture, or personal growth, we ask the real questions. This isn't just conversation, it's transformation. The King Dems Podcast. Your next breakthrough starts here.
Music licensing reimagined.
Looking for expert legal support you can trust? At Grayfield Solicitors, we simplify complex legal issues for both businesses and private clients across Essex and beyond. From pensions and insolvency law to construction, conveyancing, and commercial litigation, our experienced team is here to help. With clear, practical advice and a commitment to results, we put your peace of mind first, every step of the way. We're proud sponsors of the King Dems Podcast, championing voices that enlighten the world on growth mindset, leadership, and business insights for entrepreneurs. Visit grayfieldsolicitors.com today to book your free consultation.
We're live, ladies and gentlemen. You once again, welcome to the King Dems Podcast. And today I have with me fighting out of St. Paul's, Minnesota. Make welcome Elaine, the greatest therapist on earth, Rasmussen. How are you, Elaine?
I'm doing amazing. How are you today?
I'm good. You know, your voice is actually therapeutic. So anybody that needs therapy,
I'm happy to hear
please.
that. I'm not a therapist, though. Let's be clear.
You are my therapist. I give you the title. Just run with it.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good.
Just because your voice is therapeutic, you have been elevated to the position of greatest therapist on earth.
I'll take it.
Okay, please take it. You know, Johnny has actually been adventurous, Wall Street insider to social impact architect. So how would you describe yourself, as a person? And of course, did the journey from Wall Street to becoming a champion for inclusive wealth, right? And of course, what's the pivotal moment that actually led you to shift your focus from traditional finance to social impact and democratizing access to capital?
Wow, that was a mouthful. So I'll try to weave all of that in. So I think the first part of your question is, sort of what's been my journey. And so I shared with you before we started that I really had this tumultuous beginning, right? Coming from a very poor family, a lot of housing insecurity, a lot of drug addiction, alcohol
Grass
addiction.
to gray story.
And so, yeah, just trying to figure out how to navigate the world and growing up with having a parent who had a very deficit mindset around money and having a grandparent who had a very abundance mindset around money. But so I accidentally found myself in being a stock analyst, and you're not necessarily directly related to money, but you're able to see patterns. That was another one of my gifts. We talked about before the show gifts, right? One of my other gifts is I'm very good at seeing patterns very, very quickly. And so I was able to leverage that in analyzing stock. And I was very good at it. However, I didn't want to stay doing that. This was the 80s. I was working for a company named Shearson Lehman, which is partially responsible for the housing crisis. They are no longer around anymore, but I worked for Schuster and Lehman
Rightly so.
Brothers, right? I worked for Schuster and Lehman Brothers in the 80s, and I was the only woman working in the place where I worked that wasn't a secretary,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
right?
Male-dominated technical space.
Right. So, and I think there was only one other person of color that worked there. And so while I loved what I did, I decided to not stay in the finance sector, created a whole career working in marketing and communications, had a 25-year career across a variety of different sectors. So working fashion, entertainment, manufacturing, higher education, but I did communications and then finally landed in philanthropy. This gets to the year was the pivotal moment. So while I was working in philanthropy, I had been hearing about conversations about this thing called impact investing. And because I had this finance like foundation, I was one of the few people in philanthropy who could actually understand that language, what people were talking about. But what I quickly realized was there's a disconnect between wealth holders and people with capital and them saying that they wanted to have impact and the stories that they would tell about the impact they were having. And what I took away from their stories was that you are doing like the bare minimum. Like, but you're thinking that you are actually making some great critical impact. But what I knew was garbage impact. It was garbage. It was garbage. And but how do you tell somebody who has wealth, right, that their whole thesis is trash?
It's hard.
Right? I mean, and this goes to one of my gifts, right? A lot of people who know me say, Elaine, you're the only person I know that can deliver bad news and people thank you for it. So I had a gift for telling people that they were garbage and them wanting to actually like change and like do something different. So when I saw that there was this disconnect between the people who had capital or people had wealth and the impact that they were trying to have, I said, oh, this is, and that the people who had these wonderful projects or had these wonderful investments who had no pathway to these people, they were also not prepared for the conversation, right? And so I'm like, I had a lightning rod moment when I'm sitting in this, I was at a pre-conference. It was a meeting before a conference, and the conference was a breakdown of, what is impact investing, what are program related investing, program related investments. And as people were in this room, it was a small room, it was about maybe 40 people in this room. Every single person was introducing themselves. My name is so and so from so and so organization. I manage X millions or billions of dollars of assets under management. Now, for me, coming out of philanthropy, I thought that was a very strange way for people to introduce themselves. I'd never heard people introducing themselves by how much capital that they manage. So I was like, okay. While I'm listening to every person in this room introduce themselves, I'm in this room. I didn't manage any capital, right? So body experience of like, why am I in this room, right? I don't have millions of dollars of assets under management, but okay, let me put that on a bike rack and I'll circle back to that existential crisis in a moment. So as everybody was introducing themselves, and I'm doing this back of the envelope calculation of how much money is in this room. I'm quickly running out of fingers and toes to calculate the number of zeros that are in this room. And, I don't know if I can curse on your show, but like what was this is
Feel
like
free.
like the bullshit stories of impact that they're telling. So I'm
Yes.
like, okay. So after that convening, I sat down with a friend of mine and I said, I want to make sure I understand what they were talking about. So, and I said to her, I said, "Oh, so the people have figured out how to not pay taxes on the money that they have now figured out a way to make money on that money and still not pay taxes." And my friend looked me dead in the eye, who'd been doing this work for a long time. She said, "You're absolutely right." So I told you, I'm very good at patterns. Like I can catch a pattern
Pattern
really quick.
recognition.
Right? So I said, okay, because I'm also a marketing strategist. So I'm like, okay, now that I understand the what, right? Now the how is going to be easy for me. I'm like, okay, I understand the who, I understand the how, I understand the what. I'm like, okay, there is an opportunity for me in this space to be able to close the gap between these universes, right? But when I left that conference, I never understood when people said that they had a calling. I understood that like from a practical standpoint, right? From an academic standpoint, I understood people who said they had a calling, but I didn't understand that in my soul. Like I didn't have that lightning rod moment until that day. I'm like, I know what my purpose is on this earth. my purpose on this earth is to move money differently. That's my purpose. My sole reason for breathing in and out is to move money differently. That's what I'm here to do, right? And all these gifts that I've acquired naturally as well as collectively, accumulatively, is to move money differently, to get people to move money, but also to get people who don't have money or have money detachment disorder, which is what I like to call it, for them to think differently about money, but to educate people to move money differently. That is my goal and that is my purpose. And so that was the lightning rod moment of getting people to think, people and institutions to think differently. Hence, like my podcast, Do Different Better. But that has been now my life mantra is to do different better always and in all ways. So it not only personally, but in all the ways. So financially, spiritually, mentally, physically, do different better, right? Different isn't always better, but better is always different, right? And so I truly, truly, truly believe that. And so if we believe that, then if we want different outcomes, it requires a fundamental shift within us. Full stop, to be able to do that. Otherwise, we're just moving pieces around the chessboard, right? We're not really moving anything forward. We're playing checkers and not really playing chess.
You read my mind. On my mind, I was like, okay, you playing chess, some other people playing checkers, and of course, some other people are not even on the board at all.
No.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be. That's the crazy part, right? So that's the other part of this. I lead a women's wealth wisdom group. And one of the things that I ask the women to reframe, right? Because I don't give advice. Said, I'm going to invite you to think about this differently. They're like, well, I'm going to do this in the future. I'm going to think about where I bank, even though I'm currently banking in an organization that is investing against my own values, right? I'm going to do that at some time in the future. And I said, okay, well, let me invite you to think about something. That organization is continuing to use your money to work not only against your interest, but your children's interest. And when I said that to her, well, I did not give her any advice. When I said that to her, she's like, once I talked about her children, because her children's bank accounts were at this bank as well, her back straightened up. And I said, and the fact that they're taking that money and they are leveraging it 10 times, because that's what a bank can do. They're going to take your dollar
10x.
and they're going to leverage it. So that means they are making 10x off of your money and your children's money because you are finding it that it is too much work or it's something you want to do in the future. And so that, once again, just completely changed her whole entire mindset around, oh, I got to do this weekend. Like, I need to take my money out of this bank. I said, okay, right? And so my personal, going back to like, so what's my personal goal? My personal goal is to move $500 billion, right? To move differently. That's like my lifetime goal.
Can you move some of it my way, move it to my company?
Listen,
My
I'm trying
company
to get
needs
it
the
to my
money.
company. I'm trying to get it to my company. Then I'll get it to
No,
your
so I'm not greedy. I just need a
a little
pinch,
bit.
just a
Yeah, listen,
drop,
you're in
just
line.
a drop.
I got a place in line for you. It's all right.
Wow, thank you very much. Love, appreciation, and respect. Well, I'm not gonna forget. I'm not gonna forget. I'm actually very curious about how you introduced yourself in that meeting.
So I'm trying to remember. That's a good question. No one's ever asked me. Uh, I'm very cheeky, so I probably said I have no assets under management. I probably said something very cheeky of just like, I'm Elaine Rasmussen from so and so and so and so, and I have no assets under management.
Now I feel like you are a female version of myself because so many times people have told me, "Hey, Adi, you're so cheeky," and I'm like, okay, maybe I should create a frame somewhere and say cheeky because I love to play, with words and I love being authentic. So being an authentic person who is artistically inclined and scientifically inclined, it makes you to be able to have this accelerated thinking of making sense with witty words and
Well,
still
I
being
think that's
yourself.
why I went into marketing, right? That's why. So I made the decision to go into marketing because I wanted to use both sides of my brain. I wanted to
Exactly.
use the analytical side, which is market research, market analysis, right? Consumer behavior. But I also love to create myself. I love creating campaigns. I love creating expression. And I tell people when I was doing marketing full time, I'm like, I'm in the word business. Like marketing is all about navigating. And I think
Exactly.
if you have any job where words are a core element of your job, you can't help but have a sense of a very deep understanding of words, and which then you need to have to be a comic, right? To be a comedian, you have to
Yeah.
have a deep understanding of words. To be a songwriter, you need to have a very deep appreciation and expansive knowledge of words. I think marketing is up there, right? Because you work with words all the time, every day. That is the basis, right? Because the words that you choose count, right? They are distinct meanings behind different words. And regardless of what the dialect or the context is, you need to
Exactly.
understand that. Like what's cheeky in England versus what's cheeky, like what does even that word cheeky mean in the United States context? So being able to have that deep level of understanding, I think makes us, and even as a podcaster, right, makes us more purposeful and intentional
Exactly.
about everything that comes out of whether it's written or whether it's verbal. We are very thoughtful and mindful about the construct of the words that we select to create a very distinct picture that we want people to walk away from after they've had an encounter with us.
Exactly. And of course, being witty with it and being artistic or poetic with it actually makes it sink in deeper.
Right.
And I met a friend recently, shout out to Chidera, a Nigerian like myself. And then she is like, these things you're telling me, did you actually rehearse them before? And I'm like, excuse me, I'm a wordsmith. I am a wordsmith, that's a thing. You can pick up
Yeah.
anything and run the words through, run rhymes with it, and still make sense. But I don't know how you were able to, would I say, build your own vocabulary, because I was a nerd growing up. I did not watch movies or watch TV. I pretty much was reading a lot: philosophy, psychology, anthropology, sociology. And of course, I think when I was probably like 5, 6, 7, 8, I used to just read the Oxford English Dictionary. So
Oh, wow.
just
Okay.
like getting the
Well,
words.
for
And I,
me, yeah, for me, it was really about, it was a couple of things. So one, I was a big reader as well, but that was also because I was an introvert. So, and because of my home situation, reading was a form of escape, right? So
I see.
I was I was a big reader. But the
Uh-huh,
other thing that I think is very distinct for my experience is
uh-huh.
I loved comedians. Like from a very early
Oh,
age,
I
I would
see.
watch comedians
Yeah, and you see the way the
and
string, the string the words together.
right, I was in awe. Like I remember watching Chris Rock when he was 18 on TV, like he got like his first spot on TV. I
Oh wow.
remember because we had just gotten a color television. We hadn't had a color television before. So to be able to see Chris Rock at 18 and he was so masterful, but many comics are masterful with words, and I was just like,
Uh-huh.
wow. And the other thing that I loved was I had very limited access to TV, and so I watched a lot of old movies. And
Oh.
watching old movies was another, like I felt some of the language in the movie was lyrical. And I heard music when I would hear like people talking, and I wanted to imitate that. So those three things, I think, just like, and I watched a lot of public television, right? So, but that's all we were allowed to watch as a kid. I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of the other stuff. So it was a lot of public television, and so I remember watching like Masterpiece Theater. So there were a lot of British television on public television in the United States.
Oh
So I
wow.
watched a lot of British television. I remember one of the things that my son to this day, who's 28, he loves Keeping Up Appearances. He loves, what was the other show we used to watch? There were two British like shows, I think, from the 80s that was on in the 90s, and my son, he watched that a lot, and to this day it's one of his favorite shows. As time goes by, I think it was As Time Goes By and Keeping Up Appearances, to this day, two of his like favorite shows.
Yeah, you
But
guys should
just the
come
whole
see.
way
You
of
guys should come see us in London. Come pay some homage.
absolutely, absolutely. But, having that as a backdrop and then also going to private school. So while
Oh
even through
yeah.
all that tumultuous, like background at home, my mom having the foresight and the energy to put me and my brother through Catholic school. So there was this natural thing around education, learning, reading, but then also coupled with like getting access to wit at a very young age, right? Of watching comedy on the regular. It was that I think all of that informs how I engage with people and getting people maybe to go through things maybe from the side as opposed to going to things straight on.
Because like your vocabulary is like it's like a reservoir, it's like a database, right? You need that very massive database. If you do not have that database, it's gonna be hard for you, no matter how talented you are, in order to become a wordsmith. Because to be a wordsmith, you need to have a large database of words in your head to be able to string together.
And even not just being a wordsmith, but to be able to communicate your thoughts and feelings. Like if you're sitting in a boardroom or you're sitting in a team meeting, right, at work, and you wanna articulate and persuade your colleagues to the brilliant idea that you have to have some master of words so that they can see what it is you see. And so I think it's just a valuable tool, particularly for women, to have a strong vocabulary, to be able
Why
to,
women? I keep hearing women empowerment, but no men empowerment. Why?
well, because I'll tell you why. Because men already take up the space and they take up the space whether they deserve it or not, right?
Whoa.
So, right?
I don't
So,
believe that.
you want me to give you an example?
Give me an example, please. Thank you.
I'll give
I
you an
appreciate it.
example. And I don't want to hurt your feelings because I appreciate you and love you for what you're doing. But
Okay.
when we were on our pre-interview call, I don't know if you realize it, you spoke for a whole 30 minutes and you didn't ask me one question.
Absolutely. I did tell you a lot of
No.
things, right? But then I told you, and you know why I did not ask you a question, right? I gave you an open-ended, opportunity to speak
No,
about
you
yourself.
didn't. You
And
did
guess what?
not until 30 minutes, not until it was 30 minutes in. I was watching the clock. You spoke about yourself for 30 minutes. You did not ask me a question. You gave me an opening to affirm what you said. You did
Okay.
not ask me about me. You asked me a question to affirm what you had already shared with me. You
Okay.
did not ask, right? So that's a
Why?
very so you took up a lot of space and I let you because I
And
wanted to see how
and
long you were
and
going to go.
and I gave you 60 minutes on the podcast to talk about yourself. Because if you talk about yourself outside, well, we're going to talk about inside.
And so that's why women need to take up more space because the rationale you just gave is the rationale that men give for taking it,
Women,
not saying, you know what?
women are still taking more space. I took 30 minutes. You're taking 60 minutes. Who's got more space?
You invited me here. You
Uh-huh.
invited me, right? That is not the same. You invited me here. So you're saying it's okay that you took up a whole bunch of time and that
Okay.
you're giving me space when you asked me here. I didn't ask to be here. You asked me to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's be fair. Let's be fair to each other, right? Let's be fair. And of course, there's the man-woman argument right here. Of course, is that 90 minutes now? Okay, yeah, 90 minutes, right? The man takes 30 minutes, and the woman is actually given 60 minutes. And yet
But I'm not given 60 minutes.
yet the woman is complaining that the 60
So
minutes
this
are
is
not enough.
gaslighting. So then let me explain to you how you just gaslit me. And this is what men do,
Okay,
right?
okay,
The
let's
first, okay, let's talk about it,
yeah,
right?
let's talk about it.
So,
I'm happy.
okay. So you're comparing two completely different contexts that have nothing to do with one another.
Okay.
You have invited me on your show
Oh,
to
the
talk
balloons are
about
popping.
me. I know,
Okay.
right? That
Yeah.
is a very different thing than you and I are spending 30 minutes to get to know one another so we both feel comfortable with the hour that we're going to spend together.
No,
How can I
absolutely.
get comfortable in the 30 minutes that we're supposed to? A conversation is for two people, not a monologue is for one person. You did not get to know me because we spent the first 30 minutes just talking about you. So by the time we get on the show, you don't really know anything about me because we just talked about you. So
Okay.
you are comparing two completely different things that have nothing to do with one another. And so this is why we need both things, right? I think men, I'm not
Do I get
making
a
the
chance for a
hang on,
rebuttal?
hold on, let me finish. See, you've
Judge
just
Judy.
interrupted me.
This
You
is
just
Judge
interrupted
Judy
me.
on the
You just
show.
interrupted me. You just interrupted
I
me.
was asking for
You didn't even
permission.
let me finish my thought. You didn't even let me finish my thought before
Okay, please
you
finish your
wanted to
thought.
defend yourself, right? You didn't even let me finish my thought because you felt the need that you needed to defend yourself, right?
No,
And right? So if you had let me finish, I would have said,
absolutely.
this isn't about women getting more time, right? That's
Okay,
not the point of my comment. My
okay.
comment is that if you are having a conversation, I love it when I do a facilitation. I do facilitations with companies all the time, and there's
Uh-huh.
a term that I use. Why am I talking and why am I not talking? Right?
Uh,
Sometimes we take up a more space. We don't
uh-huh.
realize it. We are humans, especially extroverts.
Absolutely.
We take up more space. When you take up more space and you don't give space, you are actually losing out on the opportunity of somebody else's genius to actually wash over you when you take up all the space,
Uh-huh.
right?
Absolutely.
And when you are not talking, you are denying the room of the genius you have to bring to the room. And everybody does
Uh,
have genius to bring to the room. So
uh-huh.
while it sometimes sits in the context of a male female, this isn't necessarily a gender thing, but it does show up. It has a predominance of like men could listen better and
Uh-huh.
women can speak up more,
Uh-huh.
not to say that men should not talk or men
Uh-huh.
should talk less. My point is men should listen more. That's a very different
Absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. Therefore, language skills, listening, speaking, writing, reading. Yeah. And people don't take listening seriously. I love being an active listener, right? And it's a very, very important skill to master. Very, very important. But talking about you, I did my research, onto you. I love your profile. I appreciate what you do. But me doing that research about you and digging into you, and creating specially curated questions for you shows how much I appreciate your profile, right, as a person. However, in the podcasting space, most podcasters are just surface level, and their guests do not even know anything about what they do, right? So for me, when we started the interaction, you're like, oh, there's 2 hours. I don't think I have up to 2 hours to, of content. And then I was like, no, the first 30 minutes typically, is a getting to know each other phase, right? I know about what you do already, right? But what you most likely know about me is being a podcaster. But then there's a lot to me. And if you get to know me better as a person, you get to feel comfortable speaking with me, not just from a formal perspective, but you're speaking to the personality, to the person, you know, sharing things we have in common, right? You have not researched me, invited
How
you
do
to
you
be
know
on
that?
my,
You didn't ask me.
you
You haven't asked me if I
probably, most
researched you.
likely. Okay, so what do you know
I
about
did
me?
actually. I
Okay, talk to
actually
me.
did
Talk to
research
me.
you.
Tell me. Let's go. Now,
But this goes back to my point. This goes back to my point.
tell me, what do you know about
You,
me?
as opposed to starting with a question of like, hey, did you do some research? Let me tell you, you asked in the email communication, you asked me to go and research you. So I'm like, okay, if somebody's asking me to go and do a little bit of research, I listened to a
But
multiple of your episodes.
did you
I
give a
listened to
response on
many.
that? I did not see a response on it.
Well, because I don't think it's meaningful or relevant at this point, right? I think that so for me, once again, I feel like that's a mechanism by which to discount what I'm saying, right? And so,
It's not to discount what you're saying, to be honest, right? I'm an auditor, and we always say something, if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. You get it.
right,
So I reach out to
yeah,
you. I say, okay, this is a communication. If I don't get a response on something, I don't bother. Like, it
right,
means probably the
yeah,
person did not have the time. I've had over 100 episodes, right? And
hmm,
over time, more often than not, most people don't do their research on me. I do the research on
yeah.
them.
Right. And I get that, but I think you should always, I come from a place of inquiry. So
Uh-huh.
my philosophy is I would have started the conversation not from an assumption, but say, hey, Did you get an opportunity to research me? Now you're laying the groundwork for me to now go into a monologue about myself. It's like, oh, I understand. Maybe you didn't have time. Maybe whatever the case, like, I don't even need a reason why you didn't do it, but I'm like, I'm going to start from a place of inquiry and not from a place of a baseline assumption that you didn't do any research on me. Right. And for me, it doesn't even, and it doesn't, as my personal feeling, it doesn't even matter because I know how to navigate a conversation regardless of whether you've done research on me. We're going to have a good time. We're going to have a great time because we're going to have a great time. And so, and I could
Of course,
tell
and of
because
course, we are having a great time. We are having a great
we
time
are having a
because
great
there's
time.
been
We're having an
back
amazing
and
time.
forth. Yeah, and the beautiful thing
It'll be
about this
really
back and
interesting to
forth
hear what
is,
your listeners say.
yeah, I'm telling you, and the beautiful thing about this back and forth is that we are loggerheads, but we are still respectful to each other. And yeah, it's something that, yeah,
100%.
that I
Well, and this is
appreciate.
another value. Like one of my values is no one deserves to lose their dignity, right? So if that's a baseline core value that I have, that no one deserves to lose their
Hmm.
dignity,
Hmm.
we can agree to disagree and we
Yeah,
can still go out
absolutely.
and have a cocktail, right? We can go out and have
Yeah,
a pint.
absolutely. Absolutely. I've said this on the pod so many times. My core values, kindness, respect, hospitality, those are my core values. That's what I stand for. That's what I live for.
Yeah.
It's very essential to be respectful to people, to be kind to people, and to be hospitable. And I'm quite curious. You saying you dug into a bit of research about me. I'm quite curious to find out what you found out. So
Well, I found
let's start.
out, I ironically found out a lot of what you shared, right? So I can't offer anything different than what you shared with me prior, before we started recording. I wouldn't say that I spent hours, right? But I listened to a number of your podcasts. I wanted to understand the flow of how,
Okay.
once again, what's the pattern of how you associate with your guests? I'm like, okay, now I have a good understanding of what our back and forth is going to be. I,
Okay.
obviously could see that, y- uh, that you migrated to the UK, but once again, I wouldn't say that I know more about you than what you've already shared with me. That was high level. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of hit some of those high points already,
Mm-hmm.
because they're public information, right? But
Mm-hmm.
and I think I really appreciate you sharing with me kind of what's going on with you privately. And so,
Mm-hmm.
that gave me a little bit more than just what I could find, on the
Yeah,
internet.
on
So,
the
but
internet, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's always good to connect with people, yeah, on a private basis
On a
and
heart level,
yeah,
right?
heart to
Connect.
heart basis. Yeah,
Yeah, because we're all, at the end of the day, we're all humans, and even I find that, especially in the U.S. political climate, and we're so, you know, polarized. At the end of the day, everybody wants to make sure their families are taken care of. Everybody wants to get paid
absolutely.
well for their work. Everybody, and even though some people use, some abusive tactics to exclude others, it's really all coming from that place, right? So if we can get to some kind of human, I think you talked about this before the show, of see each other's humanity. We need more of that. And I think we've forgotten how to disagree, right? And that disagreeing does not necessarily mean that your perspective is worthless, right?
Hmm.
And that two things can be true at the same time. My
Absolutely.
perspective and your perspective can both be true, but one is not mutually exclusive of the other, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes there are no right answers and no wrong answers.
Right, right. But my experience is a different. We can go to a concert. We can go to the same concert and
Hmm.
have two very different experiences based
You
on
should
internal or external things.
you should watch episode 100 of my podcast with
Okay.
Joan Diaz. It's on customer experience, customer
Mm,
service. And then he
yeah.
said something along the same lines of what you're saying. Like two different people go to the same restaurant and eat the same food, have the same service, but will come out with different customer experiences. Same customer service, different customer experiences. Why? Because human beings are experiencing different emotions, different life circumstances at the same time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the experience is always
They
different.
showed up at the restaurant with different, like they showed up at the restaurant from a different place. One person may have had a terrible day. They just got fired. Their partner left them, right? And another person may have gotten a promotion, right? So they're showing up at the restaurant before they
differently.
even experienced anything at the restaurant from a
Absolutely.
completely different mental space, which is now going to color their experience.
Absolutely. One thing I appreciate about, what you said previously is the fact that you are very, what I say, gifted at identifying patterns. And that's a hallmark of an analyst. But we share a lot in common, as human beings. Unfortunately, the divider is probably the gender.
And I would say,
Same
people,
race.
I think people would say, of me, like I definitely lean more masculine. So I don't think I need any more. I think I'm good.
Probably, man, don't let me say, but some people
You're
will
gonna
say,
get, you're gonna be canceled. Sir, you better be careful. You are going to be canceled. The women are gonna come for your neck.
let us cancel.
Listen, I'm a big fan. I can get behind that movement.
Let us cancel culture. But
I'm behind that. I want to cancel culture.
what was I gonna say? Okay, I'm a millennial. I guess you are Generation X.
X. I am.
Yeah, it's Gen X. The generational wars, or what's happening? I feel like I'm the diplomat between Gen X and Gen Z.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's my thought. I even think within millennials, there's two kinds of millennials, right? There's the older millennials that have a lot of Gen X in them, a lot of Gen X DNA,
God bless.
right? And then there's the millennials that are closer to the zennials, right? So you've got two factions, right? But what I have found is, I don't know. You may personally be a liaison, a bridge builder. I don't know that I would say that your generation is a bridge builder. My experience is that, and I'm not judging, like this isn't a judgment, this is just an observation. Generation X was never allowed to focus or center themselves. I think the things that we have lived through and have experienced gave it an opportunity and created a sense of wealth with a big W, right? Now, maybe not individual wealth, but wealth with a big economic wealth that allowed millennials to be hyper focused on themselves. And what I don't think millennials understand are two things. One, that because we may not have grown up in the computer age, that we don't have anything to offer, which is wrong.
Why?
So I'll give you an example. So I remember I had to learn programming. That was my foray into like technology. I did not see a computer until I was 17. And the only reason why I saw a computer at 17 is because my high school was on a college campus. Only college campuses, because computers were still too expensive to like have at your home, right? So large institutions, right? So as a result, I learned to code. In learning to code as a generation, many of us had to learn to
In a
code.
theoretical way.
You have a set of critical thinking skills that I often do not see in millennials. The fact that millennials often can't make change. Like if I give you like you say, hey, the bill is $22.08. Like I can make change in my head, right? Many millennials cannot make change. Like literally cannot make change, right?
No, not me.
Right? I'm like, okay,
And guess
if it's
what?
20,
I'm
Listen, it's
mid-millennial, by the way. I'm 33,
right.
born in
You're in the
1992.
middle, right?
So I'm
I
right
get
in the middle, you know.
right. And what I find is even with people that I hire to work for me, there has been a generational loss of critical thinking, like how to think out through a problem. How do you think,
That's actually true. That is true. That is true.
right?
I've said this on the podcast before that it's really sad that we are at the height of the age of artificial intelligence, but we're also at the height of the age of human foolishness.
Yes.
Yeah,
And you
so
can't,
that's happening.
like, even the natural evolution of solving a problem, or even the act of like, what might be the questions I need to ask to solve this problem? And being the presumption of like, well, I'm not an expert. Well, like, who's an expert? Like, who's an expert in life? No one is an expert in life. Like, ask the next natural question, but they actually don't know what the next natural question is because the hyper dependence on going to Google. The other side of that is that Google has all the answers. Google, even AI,
Does
has
not.
a framework. It has a framework that still needs inquiry, right? So I was literally on a call last night and I said, listen, AI still hallucinates. It is a high degree of hallucination. You must critically analyze what you receive from AI because it is a high degree of hallucination, right?
Be careful how you talk about AI because you're
Listen, I ask my AI please and thank you all the time. The robots are going to be my friend.
are you sure? Okay.
Listen,
Uh
my robots are going to love me. I'm very kind to my AI agents.
if you say so, do you know what my initials are?
Your initials,
Uh-huh.
the ones other than what's on your name, or do you have other initials?
So check. Okay, my name is Ademola, first name.
Yes. Yes.
Middle name is Ithimeme,
Mhm.
and my initials are AI. So
AIO.
let's tell people,
That's a stretch, my friend. That's a stretch.
be careful what you say about AI because I am AI, my parents understood the assignment, right? And of course, what AI are you talking about? Because artificial intelligence, you could be talking about Ademola Ithimeme, or you could be talking about, wait for it, artificial insemination. So
Well, seeing that that was not part of our previous conversation, I don't think we're talking about that.
that was, many thanks to an Australian guest on my show, Andy Ide. So he actually has this AI tool for horses, right? And he
Mhm.
sponsors the horse racing in Australia. He was like, be careful what AI you're always talking about because it could be artificial insemination. And of course, I've learned to use that line on people like you that just keep using AI, AI, AI. Are you talking about me? You said what AI gave you. I did not give you anything.
But that we weren't talking about any of those things. We were talking about technology. So the natural presumption would be I'd be talking about artificial intelligence
Why are you presuming about me?
because that's what we were talking about. The previous sentence was about technology, literally.
This is a problem millennials have with Gen X.
No, what you're saying is ridiculous. It doesn't make
Yes, it
sense.
is. That is the aim, to be ridiculous, right?
We
Because
don't
it
have
is meant
time
to
for
be a
that.
joke.
We don't have time for this. We don't have time for this. There's
We
no
do
time for
have
this.
time for that.
No.
These are
See,
the
this is the part that
generational
you
wars.
all don't understand. I think this is to your point. This is the other difference, right? Like we were very brought up about time and place. There was a time and place for everything. It's in the Bible. There's a time and place for everything.
Let's go to
Y'all,
the let's go to the
y'all,
Bible.
wait, hold on.
Let
Let me
us go to
finish.
the Bible.
Let
I
me
love
finish.
that. I love
Let me
that.
finish. Y'all, and I'm being hyperbolic, right? But y'all believe that anytime's a great time, and it's not. Anytime's
That is Ecclesiastes, right? Yeah. That's the time for everything under the sun. Yeah, I think
right.
Ecclesiastes
And
chapter 3.
and
Yeah.
you all think anytime is a great time, and it's like it's not the anytime is not a great time to have a breakdown. Like
Okay.
we need you to schedule your breakdown. Okay, we've scheduled our
Okay.
breakdown. So like,
Do you want to know my favorite Bible verse?
sure.
Do you really want to know it? Philippians chapter
It's
4.
your show, so you can tell
Philippians,
me whether I want to or not.
Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me.
Perfect. That
I love.
fits. That's on brand.
Yeah, and talking about the logical reasoning you're talking about, right? The problem solving skills. I think I did tell you about the Economic Students Conference that I sponsored in Nigeria, and one of the main reasons why I did that was to help the younger generation, apparently the Gen Z, right, to improve their problem solving skills, critical thinking, critical analysis, logical reasoning, and the solution mindset. You know, it goes back to what you were complaining about. That is, a lot of people do not have a solution-oriented mindset in this age and time. You know, it's sad, but
It's
it's just the reality, right? But taking the generations downward, you are my parents' generation. My parents are Gen X, right? We don't see eye to eye on so many things, right? You guys are way more serious than us millennials. And of course, I'm a mid millennial, right?
I think there's two camps of Gen Xers. I think there are the ones that are super serious, and I agree with you.
Yeah,
I
like
think
you
I'm
guys
in
are
the
way too serious.
wait. I think I'm in the other camp, right? I
No,
think
no,
so. Hold
you're in
on,
my
let me
parents'
finish.
camp.
Hold
You're
on,
my
hold on. So there's
your
another camp of
collaborators.
I think there's another camp in Gen Xers. So just like millennials, there's two camps. I think that there's two camps with Gen Xers. I think there are the ones. I think also there's a different context with
Okay.
immigrants, right? If you are immigrating, you have to be serious because it is a serious thing to go to a place that is not your home, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And go to a place that maybe doesn't want you there, to go to a place that that is not set up for you to be successful, right? So
Yeah,
I think there's that piece of it. I think
exactly.
so I wanna give your parents grace because that is a very different thing that I'm not sure it has anything to do with generation, right? The other part of that is, and I can only speak in an American context, right? There are Gen Xers such as myself. I think work is serious, but I can have fun at work, but work is serious. But I also am a fool. Like my friends know that I just told somebody the other day, I said, they're like, well, do you care about this? And, oh, well, I'm just worried about this. I said, listen, I have no pockets for the fucks I don't have to give. Like, I do not, I don't care. I don't care. There's so many things. I don't care what people think about me. I don't care about people talking about me behind my back. I don't care if you don't
Same
like
here.
me. I don't care, right? So I think that, and part of that was, I saw this meme on Instagram, which I think embodies it embodies sort of the Gen X. It's like if you didn't like somebody, if you wanted to tell somebody off, you couldn't just type in a in a keyboard and walk away. You had to call them on the phone. You had to say what you wanted to say, and
Organic
hang
conversations,
right,
organic conversations,
right. You couldn't just hide and run, right? Like hide behind a keyboard and never have to face that person again, right? So if you wanted to cuss somebody out, you had to cuss somebody out in their face, right? There's a
Tell
resilience
me,
that comes from having, right?
tell
There's
me
a
to my face.
resilience, right? There's a resilience that comes out of having to do that, having a regular habit of having to do that, that
Yeah,
I also
resilience,
think,
confidence, and character building.
right? So be able to, and to not have someone else sway your conviction, right? I find that millennials often are their convictions are easily swayed, right?
Really? How about
Um,
Gen Z? How about Gen Z?
I think they're so emotionally sensitive, they can't even bring themselves to get that far to think about it, right? We've sheltered them from so much, or they haven't had to experience. They've been sheltered, right? I mean, I think about the things that I have seen in my lifetime, and that's not to say that it's any better or worse than millennials or zennials, right? I know personally for me, I've been through multiple devastating earthquakes. I have been through uh, Mount St. Helens. I remember waking up as a young person in California. So Mount St. Helen was in Washington. That's 2 states north of where I lived. And ash coming down and having our cars covered in ash from a volcano that went off in a
that is
2 states,
wild.
right? For weeks, ash falling on the cars, falling in the streets, falling everywhere. Being in major earthquakes, where my high school was, a wall fell on a human being as a result of the earthquake.
Wow.
The Silmar earthquake, which was a huge earthquake that happened when I was like 3 years old, 4 years old. Then watching on television, live television, the space shuttle blowing up as like a third grader, right? Very similar to the young people who had to watch 9/11. But we watched, the difference between 9/11 is you saw footage. We saw the spaceship explode in real time because every school had it on to watch the space shuttle go up. We literally watched it happen in real time,
That's crazy.
right? Then we have, obviously we've just had to see and experience a lot of things in an era where expressing feelings is not okay. Your generation, it was like all about express yourself, tell how you're feeling. We weren't allowed to have feelings, even when you go into the workplace, right? Like feelings were not a thing. No one gave a shit about your feelings, even your parents. I don't know if it's a good thing. I think right, exactly. And I don't know that that's good, right? Because it always, like, I think about our feelings and our trauma is like a balloon. So what happens if you have a balloon and you squeeze it, right? It pops out on another way. So it never goes away, right? But something is going to happen that's going to squeeze it and it's going to pop out sideways, right? So I don't know that we did it right either. I'm not saying that Gen X has figured it out, but I think there needs to be a healthier balance. Like I'll tell you another thing, like a healthier balance. Well, I don't know if you guys have got it figured out either, but here's what I will say. I will just tell you, going back to your point about my generation being serious, like, so I joke, but I'm not joking. So I tell my colleagues, especially colleagues that are responsible for hiring, I say, listen, you know what? I want to tell people who I hire or people who work in my office, your generation's like, I want to bring my whole self to work. I said, I don't want your whole self to work. And I said, I guarantee you, you don't want me to bring my whole self to work. Because me bringing my whole self to work, I'm going to hurt all your feelings. I'm going to hurt every single one of your feelings. So you don't want me to bring my whole self to work. And I don't want you to bring your whole self to work. I want you to bring I want you to bring the parts of yourself to work that want to work. That's it. I don't want the other parts.
You see, millennials are the best, Of course, for me, I strongly believe in balance.
Yeah.
Do not be extreme.
hmm
It's just like the pH
Nothing to the
scale.
extreme.
Yeah, it's like the pH scale. Don't be too acidic, don't be too alkaline. Find a place in the middle. I remember when I joined PwC in 2018, my very first formal meeting, I think during the training or something, accountants in your generation always had to put on a suit and a tie.
I had to wear
And
pantyhose.
I hate ties. And I remember I was thinking about it like, whoa, I have to work with an accounting firm now. I need to force myself to start putting on the ties. And the first day they said ties are no longer compulsory. I was so happy. I was happy.
But can I share something with you? I want to share something with you. What I find with your generation is that there's no appreciation of what had to happen to get there, right? What had to
Unfortunately,
happen?
unfortunately, people like me appreciate it. Of course,
Yeah. Yeah,
there are
but
people that are
a
pace
lot of
setters,
millennials, right? But there are a
setters,
lot of
pathfinders, and that is, not even your
yeah.
generation, the baby boomers.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, like I said, I had to wear pantyhose. Women had to wear pantyhose. You know how awful it's far worse than a tie. Just think about
Yeah.
you having to wear something
Uh-huh.
and your genitals are in this very tight cavern all day long, right? So the
Not
young
comfortable.
women who come in to who come into the workplace, and it was like, do you understand, like, what had to happen for you to now show up without a bra at work, which I don't want to see. I need
Yeah. So some people take it too far. You Now
And then
you're
they want to complain.
giving me trauma. Now you are giving me you're
I triggered you. A trigger
legitimately.
warning. Trigger warning. Trigger warning.
Uh, why? You're giving me
Trigger
trauma.
warning.
Like I have seen things in my days. Like that's why I tell people I feel like I'm in a sweet spot. I'm not too old and I'm not too young. Like I'm just, in
You're
the
in the
middle.
middle. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
clocked 33 in April and I said, wow, Jesus Christ, finished this mission at the age of 33, and I feel I just started my own mission at 33.
Well, you needed that foundation, right? You needed the foundation, and now
Yeah.
you've been given the kit, and now you should be able to go forth and prosper, right? So, yeah.
Amen. Amen to that. Some people go too far. I'm not going to mention the workplace, but I've been in a workplace where, they were encouraging business casual, dress for your day, be free, be comfortable. And
No, no, no
saw,
free.
I saw at some point certain individuals putting on sleepers and,
No, absolutely
shorts
not. You know what I
to the
tell people who come to
workplace. I'm
work for
like,
me?
it's not acceptable.
I tell people who come to work for me, I say, listen, colonization is real and it's in effect here in this office. The patriarchy is real and it's at work in this office.
So in essence, I say you're modern day colonizer.
I'm like, because people, to your point, take it too far. And so
Hmm.
I said, it should not matter. It, if that bothers you, then this isn't the place for you to work. If wearing a bra is a problem, then
Hmm.
this is not a place for you to work. You have the freedom to choose where you work 100%, and you should be able to go to work without a bra on. It just won't be here. I absolutely believe that you should be able to go to work without a bra. It just won't be here. I absolutely believe if you want to wear sleepers to work, you should absolutely be able to do that. It just won't be here. And you don't get to tell me what a terrible person I am because I'm dictating how I want you to dress that represents me.
So I think this is where good cop, bad cop works. I feel like yourself and myself, if we, had a company together, we'll do well because you are the bad cop and of course I'm the good cop. So we have different approaches. So I left the big four accounting firms as an assistant manager, and I think that's the most difficult job.
Middle management is horrible.
Yeah, middle management
I
is
feel
horrible.
bad for middle managers. It's
Yeah,
a
like
horrible.
it's
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 horrible.
it's horrible because you have to be essentially a people pleaser, and I am
Well, you
not
have
a
to do all
people
the
pleaser.
dirty work that
Yeah,
management doesn't want to
yeah,
do, and you
yeah.
got
You
to
have to
take all
do
the
all the dirty
crap
work.
from the employees.
Yes, exactly. Right. And you need to coordinate them efficiently. Keyword efficiently. So for
Exactly.
me,
It's
in
horrible.
terms of my management style, if I had somebody doing that, basically I I lead by example. I love collaborative leadership, and I would I say promote assertiveness over aggressiveness, right? So basically, I'll tell you, you're a professional and you have professional code of ethics, right? Part of your code of ethics is professional behavior, right? You have to express professionalism. Like, I respect you and I appreciate how far you've come in your career, and you should actually hold yourself to certain, you know, standards. And this is beneath you, this is below you. You shouldn't do this, right? So
But
if
I
you
think the
respect
difference is
yourself
you're
and
coming.
respect what you stand for, you should actually do better because much is very much expected of you because you have got great potentials and you shouldn't do this to yourself. So that way people feel more respected and like, oh wow, they're holding me to you
So
get
I
it.
agree
And
with you, but I think there's two different contexts. One, you're coming at it from a manager perspective. I'm coming at it
mhm.
from a CEO perspective,
Yeah,
right?
from a
It's my
leadership
company,
perspective. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
I'm the CEO, but I also find that, and I think it's different in a corporate setting. Like
Hmm.
I think you can say what you just said and it lands. I think anything outside of a corporate setting, what I have found, what my experience has been, and my colleagues have experienced, is like
Hmm.
they don't even know what professional is. Like
Hmm.
their notion of professional, they think what they're doing is professional. And
No.
and you and it might be, if you're a startup, if you're working at Google, yes, you can come in flip-flops. This is not Google. And particularly if you're working for a woman of color, right? I don't have the luxury to come into a meeting with my sleeper on, right? Otherwise, all of this goes away. There won't be any paychecks for anybody. And understanding who you work for and how you are representing them in the context in which you're representing them, right? So working for a Black woman in a US context, working in finance, yes, the bar is higher and the expectation is
It's high.
different than if we are doing a Black woman-owned startup, right? Those are two completely different contexts. And I need you to understand that and make a choice of, do you want to do that? Because if you don't want to do that, that is fine. That is a choice. I am not here to take away a choice. But if you don't want to do that, then this is not the place for you. No matter how much you love the job, no matter how much you love working for me, no matter how much you anticipate learning from me, I need you to show up in this way, because it is my reputation on the line and I don't get a second bite at the apple. And if you can't understand that because you're placing yourself in the center, then there is not a place for you to work here.
That never works with Gen Z.
No, and that's
I've
why
worked
I
I've
don't
worked
have
with
a
a
lot.
lot of them.
And no, and that's the thing. But here's the thing that I tell Gen Z right now in this moment: unless you are going to start your own business, you are going to work for a Gen Xer. So you can either get on board or start your own business, which is fine, right? Or work for another Gen Zer, or work for a millennial. Because here's the thing: I don't.
They work with millennials like me,
Right.
and
that's fine, right? That's why I say, and like I said, if you're not willing to come up to this standard, because also here's the thing: the stakes are higher for me. I don't have another 20 years to make up for the mistake that you made, right?
yeah, exactly.
I don't have that timeline. So this is why I understand there. I feel like there's no understanding. While Gen Xers maybe, I will say this: I don't think Gen Xers liked baby boomers any more than millennials or zennials like us, and that's fine. I think that's a regular, natural progression. So I think that every generation has issues with the generations before. I said, but I think the difference that I've experienced, once again, I'm only going to speak from my experience. The difference is, while Gen Xers may not have liked baby boomers and their theories and then their constructs,
And
we
rigidity.
understood it and respected it. What I find is these next two generations don't respect us. And that to me is all the difference. We don't have to agree, but I need you to respect the shit that I've gone through for you to be able to sit here and be able to say that I want to show up to work with my whole self, right? That's where I find has been, in my experience, the breakdown between and the difference between the relationship that Gen Xers have with baby boomers and the relationship that Gen Xers have with the generations that are coming after us.
So,
And with that, I've got to go.
okay. When are we scheduling part 2 for, because we have
Well, I want to hear
unfinished
from your audience, because
conversations.
they may not want the part 2. We might want the part 2, but does your audience want the part 2?
Absolutely, absolutely. Before I let you go, I have this very important question that's been on my mind.
Okay.
You're good with pattern recognition, right? And it's something, we both have in common. That's why we are both, I would say, great, at what we do. And me being a millennial, a mid-millennial, I have a lot to learn, from yourself in particular and your generation. And like I said, and I always say, um, kindness, respect, and hospitality are my own core values. So I'm very, very respectful, very big on respect, but I always try to, achieve that balance. I work with the Gen Zs, right? And I'm a young CEO, and it's not easy paving that pathway, because you need to find dynamic ways to motivate, the younger generation. And I believe in incentivizing people, because people, like I said, self-preservation is what is in need for people. If you let people know what is in need for them, they will push themselves, right? And you keep moving at the bar. But from your experience, what would you say is the common denominator? You have worked with Fortune 500 companies, accelerated over 400 companies. What's the common denominator when it comes to the companies that make it and the companies that have potential but do not achieve that potential, because potential doesn't necessarily equal to credential, right? Credential is evidence-based, but potential might not materialize. So what's the common denominator between
So a
the
couple of
guys that
things.
make it?
So a couple of things. One, and we've intimated about some of these during our conversation. So one, I think humility of receiving criticism and taking a step back and be like, I don't know if I believe that, but I'm going to take that in and I'm going to let that marinate for a while. Now, you might still come back and say like, no, I don't believe that. But the fact that you take a step back and be like, I'm going to let that sit. So I think humility is a huge thing. And I don't mean humility to the point of you capitulate. I don't mean humility to the point of you put yourself last, but humility in I don't have all the answers. There are smarter people than me, and let me connect with those people. Humility in the fact that I have something to learn from. I have something to learn from other people, even my employees, right? That just because I'm in a position of power, just because I'm in a position of power doesn't mean that I am the default expert. The other thing
Exactly.
that I will say is tenacity, right? Going forward despite fear. So courage, right? Tenacity and courage of like, even though I'm afraid, even though I'm not sure, I don't have all the answers or how this is going to work out, it's a tenacity and courage of moving forward and walking forward despite fear, right? I think the third thing is understanding the math. And when I say the math, it's not always financial. It could be qualitative, it could be quantitative. And so I include relationships, understanding the math of relationships, knowing when you need to walk away, and not saying that not walking away doesn't mean that that person's a bad person, but that person is not aligned with the situation or the goals that you're working towards. And yeah, so I mean, I could talk infinitum about this, but I think those are some of the things that I have seen of understanding the math of the financials, whatever the situation, where it's personal financials, the business financials, but also the math of leadership, the math of relationships, and being able to have some critical analysis to be able to make quick, relatively low information decisions to be able to propel you forward.
Wow. I very, very much appreciate what you said. And I would need to compel the directors in my company to watch this, because I think what you've absolutely said actually describes me as a person. But they say nemo judex in causa sua. That is a Latin expression in law. A man cannot be a judge in his own case. So I will push this to my directors. They need to watch this, because in my head, I think this is my philosophy, and that's what I live as, as a CEO. And from me to
Awesome.
you, it's love and absolute respect to you. I always say gratitude is good attitude. I am very, very grateful to have you
I'm
today.
grateful to have been here. I've got to
You know,
go. I'm late for my next call,
yeah,
but
goodbye. And
I
of
will look
course,
forward to it.
see you in part two.
Okay, bye.